Well, good morning and welcome to another edition of Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. It's Sunday the 31st of October, not the 1st of November as I originally put up, but the clocks did indeed do their thing last night. So here in London, the sun's just come out. It's been a wet and miserable morning up to this point, but it's suddenly brightened up, which is looking quite nice. So if you are out on your bike later, just watch out for plenty of water around, I would imagine. Got quite a lot to get through today. We have a quick bio of racing legend Paul Smart, who died in a collision with a car earlier this week. Tesla have pulled beta software from their cars. The Euro NCAP testing regime is improving its bike detection testing protocols. We'll have a quick look at an Enigma cafe racer. I seem to have frozen, which is tedious. Unfrozen again. As I say, we'll have a quick look at the Enigma Cafe Racer. It's an electric bike, but it seems to get its routes confused. Meanwhile, West Midlands Police have got an electric motorcycle on patrol at the Climate Change Conference. And a third electric story, Ducati are supplying the bikes for the Moto E series. We'll also have a quick look at one protest already on the Isle of Wight road races, and then we'll finish off with today's better biking tip, which is all about riding in the dark. So as I say, quite a lot to get through today, so I'll crack on straight away. Very quickly, just a reminder that Breaking the Circle, the webinar is going out on Wednesday at 8 p.m. It's all about the controversial technique of braking in bends. Some people will tell you it's a avoid at all costs maneuver. Others will tell you it's a track only technique, and some will say it's an essential skill that all riders should have up our sleeves. Now, at Survival Skills, I always try to give you accurate facts, but also well-reasoned arguments, whether it's for or against a technique, and that's just what I'll be doing on Wednesday night. So do have a quick look at the bio for the link for this, and if you want to come along and join the show, you can buy a ticket for that for £5. The link will go out approximately 24 hours beforehand. Don't get too panicky if you don't see it in your e-box, but it will go out there for you. Right, okay, so Paul Smart then. Now, I was saddened to see that Kent racer Paul Smart was killed Wednesday afternoon out riding. He was 78 years old. Police reported that his Ducati motorcycle was in collision with a car on the A21 at 1:55 on the London-bound carriageway somewhere south of the junction with Rosemary Lane. Not quite sure where that is. Police are appealing for witnesses. The other vehicle involved was a grey Ford Focus. Paul Smart was still racing when I first got into bikes. His career actually spanned a remarkable period of the racing industry's history. It was right across the divide from European and British racing machinery to the rise of the Japanese era. And he rode a fantastic range of bikes, actually: Bultaco, Cotton, Greaves, Airmachi, Norton, Triumph, Yamaha, Suzuki and Honda. And they ranged from 125s right up to a Works Triumph Trident 750. And he also rode the Works Suzuki 752-stroke triples. He started racing actually just 2 years after attending a race school at Brands Hatch. Well, actually, he started the year after. But the 2 years after starting, he actually notched up the first of his 2 podium finishes at the TT. And he also went on to gain a pretty impressive, actually, 7 podiums in 10 starts from Grand Prix, which really makes you wonder what he might have achieved had he had more backing and been able to compete on a more regular basis, because that's a fairly impressive score. He scored something like 43 points, I think it was, from those 10 races. I can't think of, off the top of my head, of many other riders who've competed in so few races and scored so many points. I hadn't realised that. By 1972, he was racing in North America on the HR2 two-stroke Kawasaki Triple. He won that year's end-of-season event at the Ontario Speedway, which contra-intuitively is in California. In 1971, he was actually joint top scorer in the annual Transatlantic Match Series. You may recall was an annual series where the best riders from the UK took on the best riders from the USA here in the UK. And he actually captained the British team in 73 and 74. Now, his most famous win, one he's best known for, was actually in Europe in 1972. He won the Imola 200 in Italy. It was a very prestigious race at the time, and he won it on Ducati's new 750 racer. And since that date, the win has actually been commemorated by Ducati with a number of different models. He retired in 78 to concentrate on his motorcycle business, and his shop, Paul Smart Motorcycles, was actually my local bike shop in Maidstone. It was my regular stop for Honda spares, and indeed it was actually the place I bought several of my bikes, including my very first CB125S all the way back in 1975. Now, Paul actually sold me the bike. As I couldn't ride it, my dad had to ride it home. Now, Dad was more used to a British bike, and Paul gave him a quick run through on the controls outside the shop, and Dad set off into the traffic up the hill out of Maidstone. He managed the change from first to second gear okay, but then he got confused, and I remember instead of changing up into third gear, he stamped on the rear brake pedal, thinking it was the gear shift. Remembered that it wasn't when the back tyre locked, switched feet, and still tried to change down for up, and that was back to first, of course, which generated a howl of anguish from the brand new motor and a trail of smoke from the rear tyre. I still remember Paul Smart looking across at me and grimacing. So in subsequent years, he was often on the shop floor, and on occasion he would stop for a chat if things were a bit quiet. He famously married Barry Sheen's sister Maggie in 1971, and of course, son Scott Smart is himself a successful former racer who competed in GPs as well as winning in the British Superbike Championship. And he is currently director of the technical director of the World Superbike Championship for the FIM. So it's a brief resume of Paul Smart, 1943 to 1921. Okay, Tesla has withdrawn its latest full self-driving autonomous car software update because drivers complained of problems. Some reports were such things as safety alerts sounding, or even though there was no danger present. And the latest version was actually rolled back last Sunday, less than a day after it was released. And there was a fairly remarkable statement by Elon Musk, who's Tesla's chief executive. He said the company's quality assurance team had found regression in some left turns at traffic lights. Presumably that means the rollout wasn't working as well as the previous version. And he then said just a little bit later that there were some issues with this version, but and this is the really astonishing bit, that's to be expected with beta software. Now, the fact that anyone can contemplate actually running a car on so-called beta software is pretty astounding, really, isn't it? Would you really be happy running mission-critical software on a business PC that was actually in beta? I certainly wouldn't. So why on earth would anybody want to drive a car that's running on beta software? Beta software is for testing in non-critical environments to see where or if it breaks. And only when those bugs have been fixed is it released to customers as user software. So I'm very, very doubtful about the whole thing there. All right, just to remind you that if you have anything to say, any comments, any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. I'll try to get back to you during the show. If I can't make it in the show, I will respond at the end of the show. So anyway, back to autonomous vehicles. I remain pretty unimpressed with the idea that they are ever going to be fully autonomous outside limited driving environments. But one thing I'm much more enthusiastic about is advanced driver assistance systems, ADAS, as they're sometimes called, because these don't attempt to drive the car with no input from the passenger behind the wheel, but they take over to prevent collisions when the driver is about to make a critical mistake. Now, as we're all pretty aware, motorcyclists and moped riders are very vulnerable in collisions with other vehicles. So when the MCN ran a sort of I call it a story, but really just a paragraph or two last week, to say that Euro NCAP have announced they're going to introduce a new testing protocol, which will test new cars fitted with new ADAS systems on their ability to react to vulnerable road users, including motorcycles. I couldn't resist digging up the full story for you. So what this actually refers to is the Euro NCAP's what's called their AEB/LSS VRU test protocol. You're probably not in the least bit interested in that, but it basically refers to testing with motorcycles, and it's due to come into effect from 2023. Now, to date, testing of vehicle systems designed to identify and avoid motorcycles has been limited, if it's been tested at all. Now, my understanding is at least one early system was launched by a top car manufacturer without checking whether it detected motorcycles at all. Other systems have proven less than fully effective in detecting motorcycles in real life, and there have been some well-documented collisions involving powered two-wheelers where the vehicle involved actually had a collision detection system operating. One high-profile crash involved a Tesla, which rear-ended a motorcyclist, causing significant injuries to the female rider in Norway in 2016. Now, things have moved on since then, but the testing has been held back because of limitations in the speed and braking capability of the available testing platforms. Now, the updated tests have apparently been made possible because of an improved remotely operated motorcycle test rig. Now, this is called the Launchpad 80, and what they're saying is it makes realistic ADAS testing with motorcycle targets possible. The battery-powered Launchpad can actually hit a speed of 80 kilometers per hour, which is 50 miles per hour. It can swerve at a third 0.3 of a G of acceleration, and it can brake at around 0.6 and a bit, which is actually fairly typical of riders' real-life emergency responses. The Launchpad can be programmed to follow a predefined path, which means you can recreate real-world collision scenarios without having to risk a test rider or real machinery, and it offers the ability for complete repeatability. Now, I managed to track down the updated test protocol PDF, and what the test scenarios actually cover are several different possible collisions. Now, the first is a rear approach by the car to a stationary motorcycle. The second involves a rear approach to a decelerating motorcycle. The third is a front to front approach. So basically the two vehicles coming from opposite directions, and the car turns across the path of the motorcycle. And the next one after that is the side swipe, where the two vehicles are traveling in the same direction, and the motorcyclist is overtaking the car when the car attempts to move into the same space the bike is occupying. But unless I missed it, I don't see any tests for detecting an approaching motorcycle when the vehicle's about to emerge into a bike's path. And as we all probably know, that's the most common collision of all. So what does the actual unit look like? Well, this is it, if I can get the picture up for you. No, that's the wrong picture. Hang on a minute. There we are. That's the correct one. It's that sort of skateboard affair under the bottom of the bike. It's basically a sort of low profile for minimizing the radar profile of the object, and then the dummy motorcycle is actually attached on top with a rider, and the idea is to present a sort of similar radar and visual profile so that it works with both the cameras and the radar detectors that certain systems are using. And then they use that to test the driver assistance systems, which include the autonomous emergency braking, the lane keep assist, and blind spot detection. Now, the system is actually smart enough that it can actually control up to 16 multiple vehicles, which means that they can actually produced some fairly challenging multi-vehicle, multi-target scenarios. The test vehicles can actually collide with the target, and they can drive over this Launchpad 80 device, and it minimal risk of causing damage to the platform or the vehicle itself. While a heavy-duty version apparently can be driven over by buses and trucks. Now, early versions of this Launchpad are already used by over 90 vehicle manufacturers. AB Dynamics, who are the manufacturers, say we see more and more car manufacturers introducing these driver support systems, and not just in high-end cars. So testing these systems will hopefully keep inferior driver support systems off the road. Not surprisingly, the rider groups are in favour. FEMA, the Federation of European Motorcyclist Associations, has said this is a significant step because these new test protocols show us that Euro NCAP takes motorcycle safety seriously. Right, okay, that's that particular story. Don't forget, if you have anything you want to catch up on these shows, if you've missed one, you can always see them here on Facebook after the event, or easier to find because they are listed in a playlist, you can head over to YouTube and spot them over there. They go out every 11 o'clock on Sundays and Wednesdays, almost always live. Very occasionally I have to do a recorded show. So what have we got for you next? Well, this beast, which I'm about to put in front of you, is the Enigma Cafe Racer, which is a bit of an odd choice of name, given that the manufacturer says that it will offer the convenience of a commuter combined with the off-road capabilities of a motorcycle in a small and affordable package. So what is it? Well, it's an electric motorcycle, as you probably guessed. It's powered by a 5.6 kilowatt hub motor. That's good for a top speed of about 130 kph or 80 odd miles per hour. You get a 50 amp hour battery, and that's supposed to be good for 85 miles, 140 kilometers in city mode. The battery gets 5 years unlimited warranty and is rated at 5,000 cycles. And you can charge it from a standard outlet in 3 hours, which is pretty impressive. And that'll get you an 80% charge. 4 hours should top it up. The bike in front of you is probably the Earl Grey colourway, which is an interesting choice, given that Earl Grey teas often serve black, but hey ho, who knows? The design also, it looks more like a flat tracker to me, I have to say, than a cafe racer. You may remember that bike. That's the old Honda FT 500, and there's a certain resemblance there, I think, to the Enigma Cafe Racer. Anyway, it's yes, it's available in India at the moment. It's about to be released and go on show over there. Right, okay, so what's next for us today? Well, West Midlands Police are going to be using an electric motorcycle for escort duties at the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP26, which has just started in Glasgow and goes on for the next 10 days or so. It's claimed to be the first police use of an electric motorcycle at a large-scale event, although I'm fairly sure that electric scooters, and I certainly know electric off-road bikes, have been used elsewhere. So the Zero motorcycle's been loaned to the force after PC Paul Ennis contacted the company with the idea of using one of their bikes at the climate summit. So naturally it's been kitted out with police livery. Inspector Sam Lewis from the Force Traffic said, "We're really grateful to Zero for giving us this opportunity to use an electric motorcycle at COP26. He says that they already use electric bicycles and that their force was the first to introduce electric cars. So electric motorcycles are something," he says, "we are actively looking at for the future. We're really happy to be able to support this event, and this has allowed us to do it a little greener." All right. Now, at the same time, in a move that probably is no big surprise, but at the same time, it is probably a little bit of a shocker. Ducati are set to become the official supplier of motorcycles to the FIM's Moto E World Cup Series. From the start of 2023. Now, obviously enough, Moto E is the electric class of the MotoGP World Championship. So why is it a bit of a shocker? Well, one reason is that Ducati has shown little interest to date in the rapidly developing trend towards electric power. They have developed an electric bicycle, and that is pretty much it. But on the other hand, racing is not just a laboratory for technologies that often find their way onto road bikes. But of course, success on the track often translates into success in the marketplace, and that certainly applies to Ducati, who were really, really struggling through the 80s and into the early part of the 90s until the 916 appeared and basically catapulted them into the public perception. So one way to persuade people that electric motorcycles are viable is going to be to race them. Now, given the growing domination of the Chinese manufacturers in the e-bike field, and the Indians, of course, as I've just mentioned, the only real surprise is it's taken so long for one of the top manufacturers to actually step up. Now, Claudio Domenicali, who's the CEO of Ducati Motor Holdings, said, this agreement comes at the right time for Ducati, which has been studying the situation of electric powertrains for years, because it will allow us to experiment in a well-known and controlled field like that of racing competition. He said in an interview with Cycle World, for the first time, the supplier of the Moto E Championship will be a manufacturer that has had the technology to place 3 motorcycles on the first row of MotoGP. Now, where do the e-bikes sit at the moment? Well, the current models being used, who are provided by Energica, which is another Italian company, are around 100 kilos heavier and slower around the track than Moto 3 machines. So Ducati's first aim will no doubt be to try to produce a lighter and more competitive machine, and then likely to focus on range and recharge times. Is this likely to spin off into a Ducati road bike anytime soon? Well, don't get too hopeful. Domenicali says you're likely to have to wait till 2025 to 30 and more towards 2030. He says it's not certain that the fuel engine has no future. Both solutions could cohabit in different fields. I believe in the potential of synthetic carbon fuel. A cynic might actually say at this point that that's more in terms of maximizing their return on their existing internal combustion engine designs than because they can't actually produce a viable electric motorcycle in 10 years. I would imagine they can. But he also flags up the need for what he calls a capillary network of charger points across the country. We're used to finding a petrol station on every corner. The same should be possible for recharging electric vehicles. And he flags up the need for fast charging. Ducati, of course, is part of the Volkswagen Group, so they do have plenty of expertise to call on, which includes the Lamborghini and Porsche. Moto E was actually added to the MotoGP World Championship in 2019, and it's a fair chance we've never actually seen a race because it's not televised to my knowledge. The deal that Ducati have done with Dorna Sports will last until 2026. Okay, so don't forget, if you actually enjoy the show, you can head over to my Ko-fi page there and drop me a line and perhaps buy me a coffee while you enjoy the input that I have out there on lots and lots and lots, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of better biking articles. And we'll come on to riding in the dark in just a moment. Jeff has said good morning, and Sue says she finds the Tesla stories rather scary. She read that he drove his own Tesla into a post. I can't comment on that, but I do know that their Tesla accidents are being closely monitored. Right, so yes, do drop over to coffee if you do get a chance. So let's take that banner off. Right, I'd mentioned the inaugural Isle of Wight road races. I've been following that story for a year, or more. They're tentatively penciled in for April next year. But the objections are starting to emerge. Brightstone Parish Councillor Nick Stewart, for example, has said that having started out looking at pro and anti issues, in my view, the arguments of safety, environmental damage and disruption are simply too overwhelming to support the races. He claims he's spoken to key people on the Isle of Man, and the advice was don't touch it with a barge pole. And he says that in their opinion, the economics are overrated, with a death toll in races and year-round racing visitors averaging over 10 a year. Which he claims suggests life-changing injuries to 100 people a year. Now, the key people aren't named, but it seems very unlikely that who he spoke to were the organisers of the TT, because I doubt they would offer a negative view of the race. So presumably he's spoken to people who'd like to see the TT banned. He also claims that some professional motorbike racers have called the West Wight circuit a dangerous course and a poor advert for road racing. Once again, no names are quoted, and of course you will find professional racers who will not compete at the TT or indeed at places like Scarborough and Yorkshire on the Irish road race circuits. So he claims the ACU, who've already given provisional approval, have a vested interest in the event. Well, yes, they do. They are the organisers of motorcycle racing, but they also have fairly strict rules on what can and can't go ahead. And you may recall that the events at Scarborough have been put on hold now for several years. So who he's quoting from is difficult to see without names. What are the objections? Well, he says that the organisers tried to bounce the island into this commercial event. And he says that when they came to answer questions about the major problem of copycat racers, they gave, in my view, woolly words about education and would not commit for paying for mitigation or speed cameras. Well, the problem of copycat riders, I wouldn't say racers, it's people riding the circuit for pleasure, is a valid concern. But I'd like to see evidence that they would be a real problem. For example, the figures given for the TT circuit, how do they compare with other roads? He goes on to say that despite racing being fantastic fun and the fact that he can respect the vast majority of careful, courteous motorcycle bike riders, he says the project is a chance for a small group of people to make money. And he concludes by saying that he expects the project to be rejected. Personally, I'd love to see the race on the Isle of Man, but the publicity shots, I have to say, have featured the wide and sweeping coast road. What you haven't seen, unless you've ridden the course on Google Maps, which is something I did actually, is that inland the course does follow some very narrow roads indeed. And compared with the close proximity of buildings, I can't help but think there are some risks to the circuit as it stands at the moment. Right, okay, so we're on to the tips for riding in the dark, and I have 11 of them to share with you. So we've lost the long daylight hours. We will be riding home very often in dark. So what can we do to sharpen up our riding? Well, let's have a look at the first thing I would suggest you do. If you have any plans to ride with one of these, I would ditch it immediately. People often fit dark visors like this because they know they're going to be riding into low sun, either in the morning or the evening. But the trouble is that they are useful while the sun's still shining, but half an hour after sunset they are a liability. They flatten shadows, they make it more difficult to spot potholes and damp patches, and you can swap these for a clear visor, but frankly the modern option is an internal sunshade. Just make sure you keep that clean and scratch free, or just a pair of shatterproof sunglasses. You can take those off when the sun goes down. Right, my second tip is that the visor, when fitted, needs to be kept clean. So you need to replace the visor if it's at all damaged. Just fit a new one. My time to fit a new visor is the autumn, not the spring, because it's the tiny invisible scratches that makes it harder to see at night. So once you've got a new visor on, you need to keep it scratch-free as possible, as much as possible. Some years ago, Ride magazine actually claimed that you shouldn't use furniture polish because it can make the plastic go brittle. Well, I got the advice to use Mr. Sheen 20 years ago from an RI helmet technician, so I guess he knew what he was talking about. So all I do is I spray the visor with the polish. I then put a damp cloth over the top, leave the whole thing for sort of 5 minutes or so, and then simply wipe clean. You'll find if there are any bugs or dirt or grit, it'll get kind of soaked into the cloth and it'll come off with relatively little damage to the visor. But if you try just to sort of wipe the visor with a damp cloth, you will find that you do scratch it. The big plus is that because you've used a wax treatment, it actually sits on the visor surface and it protects it next time from the scratching. So treat your visor fresh when you've bought it, and then carry on using wax. And the worst thing you can do is use a visor wipe across your visor. Don't do it. They actually wreck the visors. Just stop and clean the visor if you need to when you're out and about. Don't use Rain-X. It's intended for glass. It helps water bead up and run off glass, but it does destroy the anti-scratch coating very quickly on a visor. Okay, next tip. Make sure your headlights are clean and properly adjusted. Check all bulbs actually work. It may sound obvious, but as soon as dusk falls, I see plenty of riders riding around with missing tail lights. Make sure the headlight lens is clean. With the old-fashioned ones, where you can actually take the bulb out, sometimes the lens itself inside the light actually gets fairly grubby. It is possible, if you take the bulb out, to clean the whole lot inside. It's tricky on a fairing headlight, but if you've got a sort of removable shell, it's a lot easier. Get it aimed correctly as well. If it's illuminating the treetops, it's certainly not helping you see where you're going, and it's just going to hack off other drivers. And if it's too low, you won't pick up hazards until too late. Upgrade the bulbs if you can. 60-55 halogen bulb is the legal maximum, but check that what is actually fitted. A surprising number of bikes with twin headlights actually came with low power bulbs, 35, or even 45 bulbs. They're nothing like as bright as even a standard 60-55. Check the alternator output, but most bikes over 250 cc's should be able to cope with a single 60-55 without any trouble. If you've got twin headlights, you need to be a little bit more careful. Some have different bulbs, single filament bulbs in both sides. After fitting, if you detect no extra light with a higher output bulb, the thing is to have see if you need a relay in the system. I found that some Hondas actually didn't like upgrading to a halogen bulb without a relay going in. Modern bikes should be able to cope. The next thing you can look at is actually to use a higher output, sometimes called Xenon bulbs. They're not the Xenon HID bulbs. I'll just mention those in a minute, but they're standard halogen bulbs. They've just used a different gas inside. They offer up to 150% extra light, according to the advertisers. And my experience is that these bulbs with the blue coating on, and that's a pair on the picture there, they do actually provide significantly more light. The ones to avoid, though, are the bad weather blue-yellow bulbs, because they actually diminish the amount of light that's hitting the road. If you've got 6-volt electrics, there are still a few bikes with 6-volt electrics around. M&P did sell 25-watt and 35-watt halogen bulbs in a variety of fitments. It's certainly worth looking them out. Right, okay, I'll just have a quick look at see what comments we've got. Sue says Moto E is televised separately to MotoGP. Yeah, I've never actually seen it. Paul says morning, and Samantha says Rain-X for plastic is good. Okay, but do make sure it is a plastic specific Rain-X. Don't use the one that's designed for glass use, as I have already said. Right, okay, so moving on with the tips for riding in the dark. Dawn and dusk is the really difficult time. Don't forget the sun is blinding as it drops towards the horizon. If shadows are reaching towards you, expect the sun to appear ahead of you, and then you will be dazzled. If your motorcycle is in front of you as you're riding along and you're riding over your own shadow, then it's the opposite way round. The sun's behind you, and that will mean drivers looking in your direction will be blinded. So it's really important to look out for junctions and other places people turn, to be aware that drivers may not see you coming. It's no good having a headlight on if you've got the sun behind you. It simply doesn't work. And as the light level drops, it becomes really difficult to see into shaded areas because your eyes are still adjusted to the lighter sky. So be particularly careful in the moments as the lights starts to fade. Streetlights, we think that streetlights is easy enough to ride along on, but in fact, where the streetlights are a long way apart, you can actually get really deep pools of shadow, and it's not so easy to spot motorcycles. Now, it looks like you've got a line of parked cars there with a parked car with its headlight on, and another car behind it with, you can see, two headlights. But that actually vehicle that looks like the parked car with just the right hand offside headlight showing is actually a scooter coming towards you, riding along in a sort of door bashing area. So don't forget that you will not be conspicuous with your headlights in a situation like this where there are lots of other lights on the road. Riding on unlit roads is another challenge altogether. We're limited to how far the headlight shows up the road. This is a sort of twilighty picture, but you can just see that my headlight has lit up the back of the car there. Dip beam really doesn't show us very much in front, and the moment we go on to dip, the problem is that what we had lit up with our main beam has just vanished. So when we set our speed to ride within the distance we can see to be clear, it's not the main beam we have to set the speed for, it's actually the dip beam. Try and look as far along the route as possible too. We can often get clues from where the road goes from things like the outlines of hedges and trees, but don't rely on that too much. Vehicle lights may help you see where the road's going. You may see the glow of a vehicle ahead as it approaches a corner from the opposite direction. Street lights, of course, will help us identify things like junctions or roundabouts possibly. But be cautious. Again, there's some evidence that twin headlights can be mistaken for a car a lot further off. And there's absolutely no point trying to make eye contact with a driver at a junction in the dark. It's simply not going to happen. It's a pointless concept. A row of tiny lights appearing over a crest is almost certainly a truck, and the driver is telling you that he's coming because, if you remember, he's sitting high above his own lights. If you wait till his lights appear, you've already dazzled the driver. So get on to dip beam nice and early. Try not to annoy drivers coming the other way by dipping late. Marker posts. Here's a daytime shot, so you can see some on the outside of the corner here. You'll notice that the white reflective panel is on this side. Just as white headlights are come towards us, the white lights are on the off side of the road. If we were coming the other way, we would actually see red reflective markers on them, just like tail lights that we'd be following. So it's a good way of working out where the road is going, but also which side of it we're going to be riding. Don't forget, cat's eyes are also useful. White ones separate lanes. If you're on a multi-carriageway road, there will be red ones on the near side, white ones on the offside. No, sorry, I'll get that right again. Yellow ones on the offside and white ones in the middle. So they can help us work out where we are. And anywhere we're leaving or somebody could join the carriageway, there will be green coloured cat's eyes as well. That might have helped me avoid running off a slip road in heavy spray and onto some grass. I actually zipped up the slip road for a little chef rather than staying on the main road, and promptly fell off on the wet grass. Watch out for curbs as well. They wobble around all over the place. They're very often, they stick out into the road. Pinch points where the the road is narrow deliberately are really, really nasty in wet conditions. You very often can't see those at night, so don't ride too close to the curb is my first tip for positioning. And my second tip is to try to avoid a wide left or wide right position in the dark. A more middle of the road line is my choice on as the lighting goes down. It'll give us a lot more room if we actually misjudge the line of the bend incorrectly. Second thing to avoid at night is braking hard. If you think what will happen to your headlight, unless you have a very rare self-leveling light, you will lose all the view of the road ahead. So get off the brakes and get on the gas before you steer into a corner, just like you would in the dry and in the daytime, hopefully. And you'll find that the machine and the beam are better leveled out. Don't forget, you will have strange things happening as you corner. As you go into a left hander, the beam will tilt upwards on the outside, so that will tend to dazzle oncoming drivers who won't understand that and probably will flash you. But the bit of the light that's illuminating the inside of the turn will move back towards us, so it doesn't help us see where the road goes. So we don't want to hug the curb into these corners either. On the right-handers, though, the outside of the corner is better lit up by the rising beam, and the inside of the turn where the drivers are coming towards us, the beam will drop down. But again, we don't want to follow the center line around the corners. Remember the problems that the headlight view is not the same on a motorcycle. One thing that you will encounter are going to be drivers coming towards your main beam. It's a pretty common problem on the roads. If you dip your own headlight nice and early, very often the driver will see that and dip their own headlight as a courtesy. If they don't realise that, a quick flash of the main beam usually wakes them up. But sometimes it's just badly adjusted lights, or you're just catching the light at the wrong angle. The car may be heavily loaded too. One other little tip: if you're not seen, you may be heard. It's technically illegal to use a horn between 11:30 and 7 a.m. But frankly, if I thought a driver in the middle of the night hadn't seen me coming, I know what I would do. I would still sound the horn. Okay, so that is a quick fire 11 tips on riding in the dark and things that you can do to keep yourself just a little bit safer on the roads out there. If you do need some help in getting used to riding in dark because it's not something you're used to, maybe you've just started riding, or maybe you've never had to commute to work before, so you've only been pleasure riding during the daytime. I do run night riding courses. I haven't advertised them for a bit, so time to get those underway again. And here's how they work. We actually start the ride just before it gets dark. So what we do is we ride in the last rays of the sun, if it's a sunny day, and then we ride into twilight, and we ride out the other side into full darkness. So we're on the road for a good couple of hours to allow the light to change. And basically, we can see how our perception of the road changes, and we get a chance to employ the strategies I've just talked about in this particular session. So that is pretty much it for the day. I'll just wind down today's session. Samantha has said she really struggles with glare at night. Yeah, it is a problem, but as I say, keeping the visor in tip-top condition is a help at least. And Samantha also says that cat's eyes are being removed in Devon. Unfortunately, that is also something that you'll find in other places. Yes, and the new electric ones tend to be a bit unreliable. Right, so thank you for your comments on today's show, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget, I'm still running training courses. I'm taking bookings now right through into November, but we will be exploiting fine weather from pretty much now onwards. So I will be taking these bookings pretty much at short notice from the next week or so. Next live webcast, I've already said, Breaking the Circle, Wednesday the 3rd of November at 8. And then in a month's time, Wednesday the 1st of December, it will be time for Science of Being Seen today. So that's it for today. Thank you for looking in. If you are out in the slightly drier weather that was to follow today's rain, enjoy. Stay safe out there. Hopefully see you again on Wednesday, and hopefully for the webinar later in the evening. So from Kevin Williams of Survival Skills and Elevenses, bye for now.